let us discuss hypothetical proposition or conditional proposition. Conditional proposition is usually can be easily identified by its connector. Remember that hypothetical propositions in the most general level are composed of two or more propositions or two or more categorical proposition. Hence, to be able to show the relationship between these propositions, you have to have connectors. In hypothetical proposition, the connector is if and then, or sometimes A implies B, P implies Q, or any other connector of the same import. So conditional proposition may have various or may assume two types. The first one is if A is B and then X is Y. So that's one type. So it's more like a very long hypothetical proposition. So if A is B, then X is Y. Another type of proposition is shorter than that one. If P is Q, then X. That's another type. So those are the two types of conditional proposition. The key in conditional proposition is that the relationship between the two propositions is that the predication made in one proposition is asserted as a consequence from that made in another. In other words, the rule is that the truth of the antecedent implies the truth of the consequence. Okay? If the relationship is more like a cause and effect, the antecedent is the cause and the consequent is the effect. Meaning to say, if I have an example like, if it rains, then the ground is wet. It rains is the antecedent and the ground is wet is the consequent. If it is true that it rains, therefore the antecedent is true. Therefore, it is undeniably true that the ground is wet. But it is not the case that when you say if the ground is wet is true, therefore it rained. That's not necessarily the case. The rule specifically states that the truth of the antecedent implies the truth of the consequence or the consequent. So the cause and effect relationship is indicated by the connector if and then. Usually, the if and then relationship is denotated as follows. P implies Q, P implies Q, or P implies Q. So these are some of the denotations used for conditional proposition or hypothetical proposition. There is one thing that you have to remember as regards conditional proposition. In conditional proposition, again, what is being emphasized is not the relationship between the subject and the predicate as it is in categorical proposition. In conditional proposition, what is being emphasized is the nexus of the relationship. It is not, that's why there is no affirmation or denial in both the antecedent and in the predicate and in the consequent. Meaning to say, the antecedent is not yet affirmed or denied absolutely, in the same manner that the consequent is not affirmed or denied absolutely. So there is no affirmation or denial as yet in a hypothetical proposition. Okay, that's why it is conditional proposition or hypothetical proposition.